Hi, and welcome to the Party Line. This is a special bonus episode. Before we get into that, this podcast was produced on land that was stolen, was never ceded, and we stand in solidarity with our Indigenous comrades in their struggle against racism and capitalism. Welcome to the Party Line.
Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling party line. Oh, I never will forsake thee, for I love this life of mine.
This is a special bonus episode where Omar, our lovely podcast member, interviewed Brian Bean. Brian is an American socialist based in Chicago, and they covered everything from the resistance to Donald Trump to Mamdani and his campaign in New York for mayor. Please listen, and I hope you enjoy.
Also, sorry about the various technical difficulties. There's quite a few cuts.
Absolutely shocking recording on my part. Sorry about that, comrades.
All right.
Anyways, here it is.
Enjoy.
Hi everyone, I'm with Brian Bean, an American socialist organizer with the Tempest Socialist Collective and author of multiple books. Most recently, Their End is Our Beginning, Cops, Abolition and Capitalism. And Brian is here to talk to us about the state of politics in the US at a national level, but also looking at the dynamics in Chicago and New York in particular. So welcome, Brian.
Thanks, comrade. It's always a pleasure.
Cool. So can you start by telling us what the hell is going on? Trump's on a rampage at the moment, sending in the National Guard to so many different cities, deploying ICE, thugs, masked hooligans just kidnapping people off the street, talking about Antifa being a terrorist organization, in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk. Can you give our listeners a sense of the mood in the US right now and what you think is going on from the government?
Yeah. I think it is incredibly tense at the moment. I think the activities of the Trump administration is very severe and scary. It is felt in all different sectors, and particularly in the blue cities that he is focusing on, with him plowing through how politics as usual has been conducted before. He's throwing everything at the wall with executive orders, with willfully breaking laws, with allowing for his Supreme Court to, confirm all his egregious actions in a way that I think makes particularly liberals makes their head spin. I think they're used to politics as usual, polite bourgeois society being a thing in which the rules-based order is maintained, and it feels like everything is out of joint at the moment. I think the Charlie Kirk thing added to it because Trump and the kind of far right of the MAGA movement have used as an opportunity to declare basically open war on the left. There has been immediate increase in all types of surveillance that is being used, and people feel that. And liberals have no idea what to make of it. While Trump and his goons are like, we're declaring war on the left and we're going to arrest people and ship people out and end people's citizenships, the response of the Democrats and liberals are, we believe in free speech too. It is shocking, and it is quite scary. At the same time, certain components of the resistance, inchoate and disorganized as it is also quite inspiring and has a lot of potential, albeit I think that what we're up against is really bleak and dark and frightening.
Yeah, can you tell us a bit about the arrests of some of the pro-Palestine organizers and potentially other leftists? I know early on there was a number of very high-profile arrests and threatened deportations and stuff. Has the administration followed through, or was it sort of more of a warning shot? What's the status of some of those kind of people? I think Mahmoud Khalil was one of the famous ones, but there were others too.
Yeah, a number of them actually were released, in which, and I think this is part of Trump's strategy. Trump's strategy is to throw everything into the wall, which instills a sense of terror, feeds his ego that says, hey, I'm doing things, even though it doesn't all stick. At the same time, it is frightening because while Mahmoud Khalil got out of detention, they're now still pursuing him being kicked out of the country. And at the same time that they got the guy, I forget his name, the guy who was like deported and put in jail in Nicaragua. Like he got out, but he's going to be deported anyway. And so it's actually
The
hard to
hairdresser. You're talking about the
yeah,
hairdresser.
yeah. And so that's part of what the terror is. Like I think that it's like they just grab random people on the street sometimes during these ICE raids, just to instill a sense of terror. And that sense of terror fuels their power, and it also just throws, I think, red meat to his base. It's like, oh, hey, we're doing things. Like in Chicago, the person who's the head of the Border Patrol, the unit who came in to be in charge of the increased wave of ICE raids, is this guy who is from, I think, El Paso. He was the person they sent into LA during the increase there. His name's Bovino, and it's like it's a photo op at the protests in the suburbs of Chicago at the ICE detention facility. He'll occasionally come out, and he has a film crew with him, and he'll like have these like photographed charges on the protests that they'll film, and they'll make these clips with like heavy metal music that basically just fuels this narrative that there's these riotous cities that is required this like hard force of the law to come in and bash heads to instill, American order and, all that nonsense. And there was a recent photo op with the same guy. I forget what paper it was in, but one of the mass media papers. And he shows up dressed like a literal Nazi. He had his Border Patrol uniform on, but he had one of those like large trench coats on. And so there's a kind of element of it there's a spectacle. It's like we're making a show of how we're having to use this force to bring things in line from this chaotic Antifa conspiracy that is ongoing.
Yeah, and the targeting of liberal cities where very diverse working class people live together in relative kind of intermixing, and has been a real feature. You were telling me about the movement in Chicago the other day. Could you give our listeners a sense of what it feels like to be in a city occupied by ICE and the National Guard, and also then how the resistance is organized to that and what that looks like?
Yeah, it is wild. It feels like almost like a low scale military conflict that is going on day by day. The National Guard is here at a base in the suburbs, but the courts have not allowed them to be deployed on Chicago streets yet. However, there's been a series of operations, as they call them, of raids by ICE, by DHS, and the Border Patrol, in which in numerous neighborhoods, the neighborhood that I live in is one of them, they prowl around in these unmarked cars, SUVs, tinted windows, in paramilitary garb, masked, camo fatigue sometimes, flak jackets, armed, baseball hats, and we'll just go and grab and disappear people, kidnap people from homes, from street corners, from churches, from schools. And it's occurring in multiple areas of the city every single day. The other things they're doing is use of tear gas, which tear gas hasn't been used by Chicago police since the late 60s. And they are using it like willy-nilly. In the Logan Square neighborhood, they basically were stopped in traffic and were throwing tear gas out of the windows of their cars in traffic to get people to move along in like a residential neighborhood. There was a comrade of mine in Albany Park was a part of a confrontation with ICE. And again, they're just rolling tear gas canisters down neighborhood streets, like houses with families, 2 flats, working class. And in the suburbs, there's one of the detention facilities that I mentioned, Broadview, basically every day has what is essentially an open street fight. Demonstrators show up. People try to block the cars going in and out that hold the people who've been kidnapped by these goons. And the ICE and the Border Patrol will charge them, will shoot tear gas, rubber bullets. There was a Presbyterian minister who was shot in the head by a pepper bullet, like it explodes and pepper spray comes out. Tear gas all over the streets, like every single day. And in my neighborhood, for example, I think is an example of how some of the resistance is also quite inspiring. So there's these all day protests at the detention facility, but in nearly every neighborhood in the city, there are self-organized groups of people, working people, who are carrying out ICE Watch. Signal threads, people who walk through the streets, who stand on the corners around areas like schools, churches, with orange whistles, and will, when they see ICE, will document it, will follow them, will tell people what their rights are, will be witnesses, and in certain places, physically confront them, yell at them, blow whistles, and these sorts of things. The 2 weekends ago in my neighborhood, there was an increase, and there were these ICE SUVs just driving down the alleyways around the corner of my house, and people came out and pushed dumpsters into the alleyways to stop them from coming. A friend of mine who's another parent at the school my kid goes to chased off one SUV on his bicycle, followed by, his words was, an angry mob, like literally like chasing these people off, screaming at them, screaming fascist and traitor, and just making it where it's difficult for them to do their jobs. And in the Albany Park neighborhood, people came out to stop one of these arrests. A woman in her bathrobe came running out of her house and stood in front of a ICE vehicle, and they tried to run it over. And it's just like this self-organization in every area of the city. In my neighborhood, there's a signal chat that's used to coordinate, like, hey, we see this here, someone go check it out. And for the first time in my activist career, the signal chat maxed out. And so there were too many people that it could hold. So there's multiple signal chats, probably 2,000 people just in my neighborhood who are self-organized to pay attention to ICE, to spot them, to witness them, and to confront them. And it changes the dynamics of this terror. There was a huge kind of wave of raids 2 Thursdays ago, and one of the people who they grabbed was a tamale seller who I think he was a citizen. And they called a rally, the people who are doing some organizing in my neighborhood, they called a rally for like the next day. And I think like 300 people showed up to a parking lot in this impromptu rally, just chanting, no hate, no fear, immigrants are welcome here. And then balled out all the tamales up and down the street. This is largely Latinx area that has like a taqueria on every corner. And it changes the feel of it, because this is 300 or so people, not in an area of the city where protests are happening. There's protests downtown. This is just a residential area where everyone showed up just to show the neighbors, hey, we protect each other. We keep each other safe. And so that is tremendously inspiring in the face of, I think, some really frightening, really real confrontations. It's just something else to think about walking your kid to school and having paramilitaries just drive up and down the street with rules of engagement that are more akin to occupation and war than even that of policing, which of course in itself is violent and murderous and terroristic.
Totally. And it really seems like ICE has become Trump's sort of paramilitary organization of choice to repress the people. And it's got a big funding boost recently. I saw news this is a few months ago that it was regularly arresting American citizens. Is that still the case? They just indiscriminately pick people up?
Yeah, indiscriminately picking people up. There was stories in the Southwest in which they were picking up indigenous people, which the irony of that is tremendously ridiculous. But yeah, Trump in the recent budget increased their spending 400%. $35 billion, which I think is just a couple billion less of the defense spending yearly of Australia. And so it is a huge influx in which they're building concentration camps and hiring people. And the thing about the hiring of people is that they're getting people from already existing agencies, but some of the propaganda that they're using to hire new ICE agents is so clearly white nationalist coded. It's images from the settler days of white angelic figures, defend the homeland, language like that. So it is open coded white nationalist, white supremacist language that's used to recruit these people.
So they're creating a political vanguard in a way. It's a
Yeah,
self-selecting crew of very conservative, very aggressive racists.
right, right. That is directly controlled by the executive office, essentially.
Yeah. So that's a very concerning development for
Right.
obvious reasons. I guess I wanted to talk about another aspect of the political opposition to Trump, which is the Democratic Party. They're not showing a lot of it. Basically playing dead as one of their strategists proposed. But in New York in particular, it seems like the Zoran Mamdani campaign to become mayor has become a focal point for hope. But it's not just in New York. We know, maybe you don't know, but in Australia, it's very obvious. What happens in America, impacts everyone. Can you tell us a bit about this guy, his background, his politics, why people are attracted to his campaign, how it sort of meets the moment in some ways?
Yeah. I mean, Zoran Mamdani is a DSM member who served as the New York State Assemblyman, so their state Congress, since 2021, I believe. And his campaign has had a meteoric rise. I mean, he went from a nobody to stomping everyone in the Democratic primary. And I think what it represents is, I mean, just the appeal of a left wing vision. And I'll put an asterisk in that and come back to it a little bit. But it comes in the wake of the massive demonstrations around Palestine, of which he has been before generally quite good around. And so I think that the radicalism around that has flowed into that. And he's also just like a normal person, which is so different than the like zombies and goons and robots of typical politicians. And so I think it represents a left wing aspiration. I think there's really challenges to it because of the strategy being pursued, which is that we're going to run within the Democratic Party and transform it that way. I think that shows its limitations. And I think that that's something that should be a cautionary tale because of, I mean, we had a similar experience in Chicago. We had a left wing organization, United Working Families, that was rooted in the CTU, and ran a similar candidate that had an origin story that was quite the same as Mamdani. You know, a no one who was laughed at the beginning, who won a tremendous victory because of grassroots support. Huge amounts of volunteers were mobilized in the Brandon Johnson campaign, and huge amounts of volunteers, I mean, stunning, aspirationally large numbers of volunteers were deployed for the Mamdani campaign. But since Johnson has been in office, I think it shows a lot of the limitations of socialists running within the Democratic Party, A, and then B, I think socialists running for executive office in the capitalist state is something that is quite disastrous, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can talk about the Chicago experience in a sec, but like
Yeah.
Mamdani's made some more conservative comments recently about the NYPD. I think he apologized to them for earlier statements.
Yeah.
He's really emphasizing um, his sort of liberalism around the Israel-Palestine question, and probably other things that I've missed too. Like, so what exactly is driving that? Can you unpack? I guess it's hard for people in Australia. Like, there's a lot of when you have these kind of left reformist figures, a lot of people tend to give them the benefit of the doubt, explaining,
Right.
they've got to play the system or whatever. Can you, I guess, put a socialist take on what you see is happening there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the moderation that came to his statements, particularly on Palestine and the police, happened like as soon as he won the primary. I think it was a thing where in the Democratic Party primary, he was running perhaps a campaign that was more agitational. But then I think when it became clear that, hey, we could actually win this thing, then they made a strategy to make themselves more palatable to certain sections of the Democratic Party. And I think a pessimistic assumption about what it is to be palatable to regular working class people. And so, he like backed away from his previous defense of globalize the intifada as a slogan. He apologized for the racism of the NYPD, as you mentioned, and he has taken a turn towards, instead of talking about the endemic problems of racism and violence in the NYPD, to talk about how he's going to make their jobs easier by taking certain duties off of their plate. And the problem with that is that pulls back from the tremendous radicalization around the question of the police that the events of the 2020 George Floyd uprising put forward. There's an assumption these things aren't popular. And it's like, but the biggest protest movement in the history of the United States was about the police and had defund the police on the forefront and was a part of a wave of radicalization that I think led to him being where it is. So to draw back from that takes a page from the playbook of the Bidens and the Obamas in a way that I think is really unfortunate. And I think it reflects a understanding of politics that we're going to begin by negotiating with the business elite, with the Democratic Party, and make concessions out of the desire to, quote, like, govern, which I think is a impossible thing to do if you actually are committed to socialist politics. You can't govern in a coalition on a class collaborationist like program. It's impossible.
Yeah, and it's disappointing when that kind of approach gets popularized, because sometimes people say, well, these figures, for all their limitations, are good because they're bringing the left into the mainstream, and that's definitely one part of it. But then the other part of it is so much of the left gets dragged in to uncritically championing these figures. And so what actually also happens is that the radical left gets dragged into the mainstream as well in the wrong way. We get pulled to the right in order to justify our support for some of these figures. And I think we saw that with Sanders. We've seen that with Corbyn as well in the Labor Party. And now we're potentially seeing it. So I guess trying to relate to the people who are inspired by the Mamdani stuff while also pointing out the limitations and cautioning about the risks, I think is quite significant.
Riding out the party line.
It's all me. This country just has the worst internet in the world. Okay, thanks so much for that, Brian. I guess to talk about the events of the weekend, because the electoral side of things is one thing and Trump's attacks are another, but there's also been these quite incredibly sizable and widespread demonstrations, the No Kings demonstrations on the weekend. Can you give us a sense of their size, their scale, their significance? Who's kind of behind them? Just what's going on?
Yeah. Their size, it seems pretty realistic that what the press has put forward, that it's the largest single day protest in U.S. history at 7 million is probably the case, which passes the day of the Women's March, which was Trump's first inauguration. And so I think its size and scale, it's massive. Like in Chicago, our downtown was completely overwhelmed. It was one of those demonstrations where you don't even know actually where the march is and where it ends. You're just in this mass of people the whole time. Yeah, not only that, but there was like small rallies in every neighborhood of the city that was like operating at the exact same time as the other demonstration. So it was like there was this massive hundreds of thousands of people downtown, and then people in their own neighborhoods just coming out to like the street to rally. And they occurred in small towns too. So like the map of the spread of the protests reflects, a general dissatisfaction and resistance against the Trump agenda. And I think in that it is wholly positive.
Riding out the party line.
So yeah, it's been the main drivers of the protests have been groups associated with a group called Indivisible, which is a progressive Democratic Party aligned organization that started after the first Trump presidency. I think it was like some Democratic Party aides that basically wanted to build a grassroots movement to defend democracy, is their words for it. And it played a role in some of the organizing after the Women's March. In Chicago, there was some big demonstrations called Families Belong Together, when some of the worst stuff around the concentration camps, the migrant concentration camps, was coming out, that they helped call. But they have been calling a series of demonstrations that this is kind of the culmination of. So there was the hands-off protest that was pretty sizable, and this is the third No Kings. And so I think they all have gradually increased in size, and I think the explosion around the National Guard occupation of U.S. cities, the kidnapping of people with ICE, and just the intense polarization, I think kicked this one up a notch. And people came out because, they had to do something. It's a very dark time, and so it gives an element of hope when you're, with crowds of people.
Totally. I guess I've seen online some criticism of the rallies. Like, it's hard to know from a distance whether it's sort of sectarian idiots just criticizing for the sake of it, or whether there's legitimacy. I guess, could you give us a sense of your read of that, and I guess how the politics fit into rebuilding a fighting left?
Yeah, I mean, the official program of the program is pretty liberal. It is essentially demandless for democracy against Trump. And so with that, you get all typed, which is going to happen with any kind of mass movement like this. And so you have people who have signs that say, the worst one is, if Kamala had won, I'd be having brunch right now. So like that's a literal sign that I've seen numerous places. So that's like the worst of the worst. Yeah. And you see Palestinian flags quite common at them, and people wearing keffiyehs, and people who have all types of left-wing stripes. And so I think it's such a big tent that people come out. I think, yes, all the critique of the official politics of the event are completely dead on. At the same time, I think some of the critiques do have a sectarian air of envy. And it's like, so if there's not more left-wing presence, if our ability to call something is not on that level, then that's like our failing as a left, if we're not able to present an alternative that is more exciting and palatable and makes more sense than like Kamala Harris so I can have brunch, then like that's on us as a left. And so I think that I think the challenge for us is people are activated, and that activation includes, a bunch of liberals with politics that are a dead end into reelect milquetoast Democrats, and all the people who demonstrated in the massive demonstrations on Palestine. People came to this. The people who are involved in confronting and standing up to ICE are a part of this. And so the challenge for us is in the midst of people coming out, how can we seek to cohere some kind of a left that can fight around its politics, that can begin to pull together an alternative to the notion that the only way we can oppose Trump's fascism, or maybe fascism, or however we want to label it, is to fight on the ground that we need to get rid of capitalism, and we need our own party and vehicle independent of the Democratic Party. I think that like how we do that is our task, and the people that are there is an audience. And I think the question is how we can get our shit together to cohere that into something that is more durable than the dead end that liberals want to present for the resistance.
Awesome. Thanks so much for talking to me, Brian, and good luck with dealing with both Trumpism and liberalism in the US.
Thanks, comrade.
Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling party line. Oh, I never will forsake thee, for I love this life of mine.